أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome on Youth Matters with me, your host, Sakina Habib. Inshallah, today we'll be continuing with our FATIMIYA program. And before I would like to begin, I would like to start off by saying that after the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's demise, the Muslim Ummah did not just turn their backs on his household, but they ensured that their lives were fraught with pain. And on this day, let us console the Holy Prophet and his household over the martyrdom of Lady Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha. And we pray for the hastened reappearance of the final successor from the Prophet's progeny, because he will be the one who will avenge his grandmother's martyrdom, along with establishing the rule of justice. So inshallah, we pray for that. And we will be starting today's program with a special segment that we would like to present to you in regards to the ziyarah during the Fatimiyya. I'm so happy actually, because we'll be having Sister Birak, and we will also be having a special guest who is joining us from Karbala right now, Brother Ali Reza Taimur, who is still in Iraq. Yes, as I mentioned, he's in Karbala. And Sister Birak, who recently just got back. So without much further ado, I would like to welcome both of them on board today with me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the both of you on Youth Matters.
Alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. How are you both?
Jet lagged.
Alhamdulillah, all well. I'm hoping, yes. So inshallah, we'll be having a really nice interactive conversation today. To begin with, I would like to tell everybody, as the topic is very clear, we'll be talking about empowerment through Fatimiyya. I was having these, we had this earlier episode with Sister Birak, where we spoke a lot about women empowerment. We will be getting into that, inshallah. But before that, as I mentioned, we want to present something very special and unique today. As all of you can see, we have a special guest with us, Brother Ali Reza. I would like to welcome him on board, and I would like to ask him to tell us about his first ziyarah trip to Iraq, especially during this Fatimiyya season.
Assalamu alaikum. So it was a very special experience as I got to experience it in 3 different setups. So firstly, I was let me tell you how I decided to come to Karbala first. So first I got to know about Sister Birak going to Karbala through our projects that we were doing together, and I happened to get my passport around the time that she was going. So I asked her if she can take me with her, and she's like, yes, join my journey. And I was like, oh, great. So she introduced me to this group called Spiritual Journeys, and I joined them. And so the first part of my ziyarah was with Spiritual Journeys, although I joined them a bit later than the time. So I got to experience the ziyarah vibes with a group, and then I decided to stay a bit later for a project that I have upcoming. And so I got to experience the vibe of having someone in Karbala, which was Sister Birak. So for a few days we got the chance to spend the time together in Bain al-Haramain. And then after that, Sister Barak left too, so I was alone in Karbala. So I got the chance to be alone in this holy land and experience how it feels to be by myself, with the Ahlul Bayt. So 3
Alhamdulillah.
different unique experiences.
MashaAllah, that's
Very,
beautiful.
very beautiful.
I told the brother that, listen, we'll go, but the only thing is I have work during the daytime with the widows and orphans that I was working with. So you go with the group during the day, do all
Yeah.
the group activities and the tours and the ziyaras and the education part that they do. And then at night, we'll
Yeah.
meet after we do our work and you do your group. And then in Najaf, we got the chance to do that, to be around the Haram area inside and stayed up till Fajr. We froze and almost every night. And then we reunited back again in Karbala. I still had some obligations with another group, Heart and Mind Youth, where we did a series of FATIMIYA lectures and mental health lectures. So he was busy with the group during the day. Yeah, and then at night we met up again, and it was really nice just having somebody there that you know from your hometown and a family friend, and showing them like your grandfather's house. We actually, I actually got a chance to go inside that house and see it. I don't think you were with me that night, but just things like that, or just different parts, or like, oh, look at this, look at that. I'm not a tour guide, but just because I've been a few times now, and a native from the area, I got the opportunity to show off my city, so to speak, you could say. And what better city to show off than the beautiful land of Karbala, right? And for Zaire, for the first time, that was really nice to see the expression, when they first saw Najaf, Imam Ali, and then in Karbala, different areas. Alhamdulillah, it was really nice. People were like, make your own tour group. I'm like, no, we're not tour group. Although wherever we went, Ali Rada recited. He was reciting wherever we went, and we've got stories to share about that, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah. So, mashallah, Ali Rida, I wanted to actually tell you this, that I heard your latest Latmiya just this morning, and it was on Sister Barak's feed. And oh my God, it really touched my soul, like a very soothing masterpiece that, you produced. And, mashallah, you have a very beautiful voice, and I'm so happy that you're using it in the way of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So my question to you would be that what really inspired you to work on such a project?
Honestly, this project did not exist 3 days ago. So my main project is yet to come. When I realized I'm actually coming to this holy land, I decided to produce one of my compositions, which I performed 2 years ago on stage in Carleton University in Canada. And so I decided to contact a professional composer to help me produce this song, this tribute, I would say. And he agreed, and so I sent it to him, and right now it's under arrangement, and soon it's going to be recorded and inshallah fully produced. But in the meantime, as I was waiting on that project, Sister Brock sent me this very beautiful Latmiya, and she told me about like her memories with this Latmiya and how she really likes this Latmiya. So I decided to, in the meantime, as I'm waiting for the arrangement of the other project, why not arrange this one myself in this very tiny hotel room and record some footage and let me see how it turns out. And it did turn out very well. I honestly didn't expect it to be at this quality. As like when I was recording, children were screaming in the hallway, and I wasn't expecting it to be at this level, honestly. But yeah, so the first
Can I
inspiration
just
I would
bring
say was
attention?
Sister
Can I
Barak.
just bring attention? Bless you. Can I just bring attention to the fact that within 14 hours he's got 340 views on this? So let's keep on encouraging him,
Yeah,
inshallah.
yeah, inshallah,
Thanks.
inshallah. And it's when you always work towards something with a good intention, especially in the way of the Ahlul Bayt. Lady Fatima always helps you, and Imam Hussein and all of them. They really help you. So that's probably one of the reasons why it turned out phenomenal than what you thought it would be. So
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah, that's
yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. Also, now, brother, how was this Fatimiyya experience for you during this trip, especially that you were with Sister Birak, since you both went? And we all know that Birak is originally from Iraq, and she has family and friends there, and she travels there frequently. So, what was the whole experience like for you?
Um, as I said, experiencing it from three different perspectives, it was really nice. And the fact that Barak was from here and she knew stuff, that was very special too. So she showed me around, took me to Maqam Sahab al-Zaman and different places. It was very, very special. And the fact that Sister Barak was from Karbala made it even more like at home, when I felt at home in Karbala even more than Najaf. And at first I couldn't even express anything. And I remember sister was recording a live video and she was like, "Why don't you speak?" I'm like, "I don't know what to say." So slowly I was able to express more feelings about this experience.
You're still processing. It looks like it. It's going to take a while to. I'm
Big
still
time.
processing Muharram. I'm still processing Muharram back in August. It takes a long time for sure.
I'm telling you, this morning after my battery died and our live got cut off, what I did was I went to Imam Hussein and the doors were closed. They were cleaning. I didn't know they do that. So what I did, I stuck to the door until they opened it for an hour.
That's why it
And
took long.
yeah, and when I got in, the the shrine all cleaned and like without no um, very very quiet and not crowded. I just sat down there for a long time, staring at the shrine and trying to believe that I'm actually here. And this whole time has passed by already, almost 2 weeks. And yeah, even after producing a tribute in Bain al Haramain, recording all that footage, I still couldn't believe it, and I still couldn't digest this. So I just sat down and looked at the shrine for, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour. Time flies when you're around Ahlul Bayt.
When you're in
Yeah,
heaven.
so I'm still processing. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and may Allah bless you with more. And actually, this morning only Barak and I came up with this idea. I mean, this wasn't actually planned that we would have Brother Ali Rada on the show as well. It was just like I heard your Latmiya and I was so impressed, and I asked Mr. Barak, "Can we have Brother Ali Rada on the program?" And Alhamdulillah, we have you here with us. So, what other future projects are you looking into in line, especially with after this Ziyara experience of yours, Brother Ali?
Alhamdulillah, as I said, the main project is yet to come. So if I want to expand on that, so 2019, Arba'in, we had a show in Carleton University called Every Land Every Day, and it It was a theater play alongside with speeches and live performance. So I was the composer for the theater play and the performance.
Ironically, I was asked to be part of that program, but I was already in Iraq. I remember, so we would have met back then. SubhanAllah.
SubhanAllah. So yeah, that live performance, it's a poem by Herbert George Wells. He's known as the father of science fiction. And my friend Fatima Anvari, she sent me this beautiful poem, and the moment I read it, I had melodies in my mind. So I wrote them down, composed the full piece, and arranged it within a day. So then we performed it live on a stage in Israeli Theater in Carleton University, and it went really well, but I never thought I would actually produce it until I was coming to Kabbalah. So I contacted one of the very professional composers in Iran, and I honestly didn't expect him to answer me back, but he did within 24 hours. Alhamdulillah. And yeah, so right now it's under arrangement. It was supposed to be ready earlier, so I can record the video in Bain al-Haramain, but he needed more time to work on it, so it's alright. I'll probably record half of it in Canada and the other half in Bain al-Haramain. Inshallah, soon it'll be ready.
Inshallah. Brother, I have a special request for all the viewers who are watching us. Since you have a very beautiful, melodious voice, if you could bless our today's program with a live recitation of any beautiful latmiya that you would like to present to Lady Fatima Zahra Salamullahi alayha. So if you could have that, please.
Inshallah. So I would like to recite Tasbihat Hazrat Zahra by Mehdi Rasuli. روی لبها نور و قدر و کوثر و طه، ذکر نورانی عاشقها، تسبیحات حضرت زهرا. الله اکبر این همه جلال، الله اکبر این همه شکوه، الله اکبر در راه علی، فاطمه ایستاده مثل یک کوه. صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه. میدونم که راز شهادت این اشکا، رنگ خدا میگیرم من با تسبیحات حضرت زهرا. الحمدلله که نوکرتم، الحمدلله که مادرمی، الحمدلله از بچگیام ما در سایه روی سرمی. صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه. از غصه ها چشم عاشقا شده دریا، روزه بعد نماز ما، تسبیحات حضرت زهرا. سبحان الله باغ بهشت دود، سبحان الله از لحظه ورود، سبحان الله پیش چشم علی، آیه های کوثر شده کبود. صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه، صلی الله علیک یا فاطمه. اللهم صل على محمد.
Thank you so much for that beautiful recitation. I mean, that's one of my top favorite Latmiyas right now. And, I was so eager to hear that. Mashallah, you really recited very nicely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, inshallah, the brother will be bidding us farewell because he is in Karbala, and I thank him for joining us for a couple of minutes. Thank you so much, Brother Adiwala, for your precious time and for sharing that beautiful journey of Fatimiyya with us on this program. And it was his first Ziyara experience, so it's something really special to know his experience. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Brother Adiwala. Now let's get back to our normal topic and conversation with Sister Berak. As you all know that we are continuing with our women's empowerment topic. Previously, we had a couple of questions still left, so we would like to continue with that. And again, I would like to give an introduction that women's empowerment can only be defined to promoting women's sense of self-worth, their ability to determine their own choices, and their right to influence social change for themselves and others. So in Western countries, we see that female empowerment is often associated with specific phases of the women's rights movement in history, and a lot of young females have this question in their mind: that why is it that today's empowerment is not seen, is not perceived in such a manner similar to the lives of the holy household, peace be upon them, the ladies of light, because today's women, today's generation do not seem to connect with them because these were ladies of the past. So therefore, their methods cannot be applied in today's era. So, Sister Berak Hussein, can you enlighten us on this question as to why is this?
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Another round of gratitude and blessings to brother for sharing his experiences and also his beautiful voice. And I highly recommend for people to check out our pages where we were doing constant lives wherever we were, including once when he was in Karbala and I was in Najaf live there. And so you could see the beautiful vibes and just how everything went, especially during Fatimiyya. So a really good question, because when we think about it, a lot of young women today don't relate to Lady Khadija, Lady Fatima, and Lady Zainab, saying, oh, they're from the past. They lived in a different time and era. I can't really connect with them. They're not really relevant to me today. And I counter that by the opposite, saying they're more so relatable today than ever. If we look at their lives, and I'm analyzing this from a psychosocial perspective, from what I've read about them, from what I've been inspired by them. So I'm not speaking from a scholarly or academic expert perspective who's dedicate their lives and research on these women, but rather from my own research and experience and reflections as a psychotherapist, and when I attend majalis and read books and lectures and things that I think about. And I came to this perspective that they are indeed more relevant today. Last time we spoke about all of them in different ways. Let's do a little bit of a summary. So if you look at Lady Khadija, salam Allah alayha, she lived in an era where there was a Muslim ban against them, you could say. That's something relatable.
Yeah.
She was the one she was a businesswoman in a tribal society that was very patriarchal, harsh, cutthroat, where female children were buried alive because of the lack of worth and value of them being female, just another mouth to feed and shame to the family. This is the kind of era she grew up in, right? And she was the one who proposed to the Prophet after she saw his akhlaq, after she saw how trustworthy and honest he was, and the well-known, handsome young man. And she was the one who proposed after she was turning down all sorts of proposals from all of the rich, powerful businessmen and tribesmen of Quraysh. So if you think about that formula, wealthy woman turning down proposals left, right, and center. She proposes to a man, right? And she was the one with her wealth that she irrigated the early days of Islam, which we know from the Prophet what he said, had it not been for Khadija's wealth and Ali's sword, his strength meaning, right, then Islam would have perished. So this shows right there that this woman is somebody that we can relate to today. She's a working woman. She's the one who proposes. She's the one who gives money and sources the early days of Islam to protect it when there was this huge ban from Quraysh against the early Muslims. Is that not something we can relate to and connect? Contemporary modern women living in this era, especially those of us who are working, who are pursuing an education and so on and so forth. This is one of the first sources of inspiration that you have that we can connect and relate to. If we look over to Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra salamallah alayha, taking from the life that she had with her mother, and what I read, that her mother passed away when she was around 5 years old, and then she had the title of Ummu Abiha, right? The mother of her father. She took care of her father, just like her mother took care of her father when he was harassed and targeted and abused when he first started bringing the message of Islam, right? And they were married for over 25 years. And they set that blueprint of what a family should be like. And they set that household where Sayyidah Fatima grew up in that divine inspiration of her father and her mother, which she then copied and put into her household, right? So right there you see that a healthy household, how it can impact the psychological upbringing of a child. Now, these are no ordinary children. We're talking about the Ahlul Bayt. They were divine, ma'soomeen. Regardless of that source of perfection and inspiration is a source of inspiration for us to work towards. And so when you have this household that is brought up in such a manner that inspires us, it teaches us also how to bring up our children, right? This was the blueprint Sayyidah Fatima copied from her parents onto her household, in which we see Sayyidah Zainab, Salam Allah alayha, Imam Hassan wal Hussein, Kulthum grew up in as well, right? So Sayyidah Fatima, salam Allah alayha, whom we're honoring today, Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, the greatest ladies of the universe. And we can go on and on about her greatness, but let's pick a few things that are relevant to our discussion today. So we see, again, what kind of household she grew up in, the divine inspirations. She saw the political turmoil. She saw all of the abuse that was against her father, yet she still, despite that, she was the one who's giving a lot of love and compassion to her father, right? And she was also, as she grew older, she was educating other women. This is important, right? She was a scholar in her own right. She also had the land of Fadag, which was almost a social, what's the word I'm looking for? When you read about it in the book, The Rights of Fadag, by Sayyid Mutahari, Shahid Mutahari, you see how he talks about how the land of Fadag Fadag in History by Shahid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. Sorry, completely got the wrong Sayyid here. Shahid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr in Fadag in History, he talks about how this land was a source of income that was run by these women with Sayyidah Fatima. Yeah. She's got her mother's business savvy here in a way, right? And where these women became dependent upon this land where they grew, they sold they sold the goods of the land, so to speak, and worked the land. So it was a social network in a way, but also a socio-economical system in place for these women, right? So this is amazing right there that you see that Sayyidah Fatima was in her own way a businesswoman ahead of her time, and providing the social network support for women who couldn't necessarily do it themselves. Is that not something that we can relate to today? Is that not something we can be inspired to today, right? In addition to that, we'll get into more details after, but we knew what she did after her father's demise. She went and demanded the rights of this land that was taken away from her by those who supposedly said that they followed her father. And this woman, she stood up. She was known not to be seen out in public. Her shadow was never seen, right? Because of her chastity and her modesty, yet we knew of her, right? But during those times, no. She left, she clothed herself, she left the house, and again in the book Fadagan History, the Sayyid describes explicitly how this woman left with a group of women behind her, okay, and walked to the Masjid Nabawi, deliberately drawing attention because of what she needed to say. Also, she was known for the way that she walked. Her gait was similar to the Prophet. And I loved when I was reading about that, I imagined in my head how this woman who had the exact same walk as the Prophet of Islam was walking towards Masjid al-Nabawi to demand her rights, right? And this is phenomenal here because, again, this is a woman that was never seen, yet she was forced to get out. She was forced to get out and speak for her rights, which shows you that women, when put in a position where their rights are taken away, no matter what they were, she has the ability and the power and the right to go and ask for her rights. Is this not something we can relate to today? Right? So this is something that is really important, that the contemporary woman, no matter what modernity she is living in, this is a source of inspiration as well. And we'll get into more details with the abuse that she experienced. But we look at Sayyida Zainab, salamullah alayha. So she's the granddaughter of Sayyida Khadija. Her mother was Sayyida Fatima, and she herself was orphaned very young. I believe it was around 5 or 6 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So she, in a way, I take that back. I'm not sure how old Sayyida Khadija was. So I'm not sure. So I'm going to take that back. But I know definitely Sayyida Fatima was young, and Sayyida Khadija herself, when her mother rather passed away, she also became Ummu Abiha to Imam Ali, alayhi salam. And Sayyida Fatima, we know, lived only 18 years around that time frame. So it was a very short amount of time that Sayyida Zainab had her mother, right? She grew up in that similar household that was divinely inspired, of that blueprint of what a healthy household should be. She was known as the educated one without knowledge, being educated. And so she grew up in that environment of knowledge, and she was a renowned scholar that even both men and women sought education from. Is that not something we can relate to today? A scholar of a woman that being sought after by both men and women for knowledge, right? She would give classes of Quran, fiqh, and history, and all of that to the women. And in Kufa, when her father moved his administration, when he became the imam at that time. Just a little point back to Sayyida Fatima. Sayyida Fatima was defending the imam of her time when she stood and went and got her right, to speak about her rights in Fadag, and she spoke about the people who turned against Imam Ali and her father. She was defending the imam of her time. Is that not something today that we can relate to? When we talk about, be prepared for al-Mahdi, be prepared and wait for him. How do you defend your imam of your time? Sayyida Zahra taught us that at the time when her husband and herself were ambushed by the society. And Sayyida Zainab learned from that, because we know early on she witnessed all of these tragic historical events that took place against her and her family, right? And she witnessed that very young. She was very wise. If you take a look at the book, Who is Zainab? By a sister, Shahnaz Kubaisi, she does a wonderful job. It's a great book, yeah, where she talks about the upbringing of Sayyida Zainab. And I really loved how she described that, how Sayyida Zainab, salamullah alayha, was very politically aware of what was going on against the tyranny, against her family at the time of different stages of her life. So she was very aware growing up what was going on. And this all prepared her for Karbala, right? Needless to say, she left with her brother Imam Hussein. She was always known to be around him and inseparable from him. And she wanted to be with the Imam of her time. This is also another source of inspiration for us, for the women today and men today. Look at this woman. Not only was it her brother, but it was the Imam of her time. And she wanted to be with him and knew she had a role to fulfill. And what a role she fulfilled that inspired us still today. And we spoke a lot about her last time, but we see of how she defended Islam, how she protected the last lineage of the the Prophet of Islam, with the Imam Zayn al-Abidin salam Allah alayhi, where there were times where he was unconscious, and if you think about it, she was the Imam of the time in those few moments, which is incredibly powerful and important to think about, that this strong woman not only had to protect the women and children and the lineage of the Prophet, but she herself was the leader in certain times and moments. Right? She was a source of support for her brothers, Al-Abbas and Al-Hussein, while they were her protectors, but then the role flipped when they were martyred, and she had to protect. This is a role of a strong woman who had the weight of Islam and the world on her shoulders to protect for the sake of humanity. And she took on that role. And moving forward, you know her story of what happened and how she spoke up in Kufa and the people who were celebrating joyously. She destroyed them with her stance and what she said. Right? Although she was dealing with a lot of trauma from what she witnessed, she held herself. Then on to Sham and what she witnessed along the way, with the children dying along the way in that harsh, cutthroat terrain. When she ended up in Sham, again, she protected the Imam of her time, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, and she stood up to the tyrant, the ISIS of her time, and said, "No, I see nothing but beauty in what you have done to us." And that is a huge reframe of the tragedy and the battle and what she saw in Karbala from each of her family members and the army that was with Imam Hussein being slaughtered, to the Abdullah Radhiya, to her nephews, her own sons, her own family, and her own brothers in the end. Imam of her time. She still, with the burning tents, protected as much as she could to preserve. She stands up and says, "I see nothing but beauty in all of the slaughter," because it was a sacrifice to God. But it was this sacrifice. Look at what this woman did. How can we not relate to this today? It was this woman and her family's sacrifice that awakened that sleeping consciousness of the time, that let people be aware of what was going on, and it shook them up. It woke them up to the corruption that was going on that we see today in our societies, in our Muslim countries. How is this not relevant? How is this not something that we can connect to and get inspired from? And also, if we look at it from another angle, from the psycho-spiritual perspective, the trauma that she experienced, how did this woman hold herself and still do what she did? That is a source of inspiration no matter what. And those of us who deal with mental health challenges and issues, your mental health issues are valid. Yet when we look at the story of Sayyidah Zainab, salam Allah alayha, and what she did, no matter what difficulties we go through, she's a source of inspiration for us to get through these difficult times. Through her strength, we can also garner that strength to get through our difficult times. Is this not something that both men and women can relate and connect to? How are these women of the past not relevant today, if not ever, even more so today, especially with what we see in the world of hijab? And we spoke about that last time, but just a quick reminder, how can we not connect to these women who preserve modesty and chastity? Now, I'm not saying to go around wearing a full abaya, which I've done, by the way, and I love wearing it. I just can't wear it in Iraq. I trip and fall on it. It's just really challenging over there. I'll wear it where I can. However, we're not saying to wear a full abaya like that and burqa and cover your face. But the idea of modesty today in hijab is gone next level, where it's become a mockery of the hijab. Need I remind you, it was Sayyidah Zainab who protected Islam, meaning she protected the hijab of today, meaning if it wasn't for her and her inspiration and her strength, you and I would not be wearing the hijab today. How is this not relevant? These are the arguments that I present to any person who says we cannot connect to these women. They're from the past. They're not relatable. I argue quite the opposite, especially as who we are honoring today, Sayyidah Fatima, who stood up against the same people who claimed to be her father's companions and friends, and what they did to her, which I think leads to our next part of our segment here.
Definitely, because we would like to reflect and talk about the psychological trauma that Lady Fatima went through in various vital aspects of her life. If you think about it, she really went through a lot. So, what lessons can we learn from them that we can apply in our lives today.
So let's look at early on again in her life. She lost her mother when she was 5 years old. What does a 5-year-old do when they lose their mother? They lose part of their whole world. Yet because she had such a father, not only was he the prophet, but an incredible father who valued her, respected her, who treated her the flower that she was from the heavens that was plucked from this earth too soon, as the Imam Ali said. And we see with the examples of how he treasured her, the prophet, for example, she'd walk into the room. He would get up, hold her hand, and seat her in his spot. What does this show you? How to value and respect your daughters, women in your family, right? So this is the type of woman that we're talking about, how she was valued and presented to the world as such. And we hear again and again how the prophet valued and respected her and honored her and took her to that level where he would explain to people that, and I'm paraphrasing, that whoever angers her angers me, whoever angers me angers Allah, and Allah will be displeased with. Look at the value and weight of this woman that she had, right? And we can go on and on about her greatness, and we know this, right? But what I want to focus on is we see how great she was. We understand the value that was put upon this woman as an example for us to follow as the mistress of the women of the universe, the top perfection of what a woman embodies, whether in her akhlaq, her education, as a wife, as a daughter, as a mother. But as we know from scholars, and I paraphrase, Fatima is Fatima, right? That she is in her own glorious way, her own way. We cannot compare her to the men in her lives, right? As women empowerment, we know that Fatima is who she is, and we take that power and empowerment from her, right? So early on, she loses a mother, yet she was honored and loved through her father and treasured. So imagine, she took on that role of taking care of her father after she loses her mother. What a tragedy that was, right? We see later on during the ban of what Quraysh did against the Muslims. So they experienced hardship. They barely had food, water, clothing during that time. Yet it was her mother before she passed who protected them through her wealth, right? So they experienced this type of hardship. And as she grows older, we see how people were hating on her father, throwing trash, garbage, excrement on her father. And he would come home hurt. You read those stories and we see this child taking care of her father, consoling, cleaning, right? You see, she witnessed those things. We see how she was sought after as a young woman for marriage from all of the princes of Quraysh. Turns them down, just like her mother. And in silent agreement to the prince of believers, Imam Ali alayhi salam. And in their short life together, they again exemplified what a household should be like, and their duties together, outside the house, inside the house. And we see here the role of Imam Ali, where he also helped inside of the house, right? And then how Sayyidah Fatima took care of things as well. And there was, I don't want to use the word equality, but there was a balance. I prefer to use that word, a balance, right? And so this is a source of inspiration for us as well. But we see throughout their lives, they experienced that hardship. We see a big blow to Sayyidah Fatima, and we know how close she was to her father, right? How she experienced that tragic loss, and she was crying upon, time for such a long time, to the point where people were complaining about her crying and her grief. And so Imam Ali built Bayt al-Ahzan for her so that she can contain her grief in there. So imagine not only losing your father, but the Prophet of Islam. What did that do to her and the people at that time who cared, right? And we know, I don't need to get into the details of what happened, but along with the story, her rights were taken away from her. Her land that she used, like we talked about earlier, to irrigate her society at the time of women and empower women and provide a source of income, was taken away from her. And this was given to her as a gift from her father. What right was this taken away from her? And then the excuse is, the children of the Prophet cannot inherit. But she defended her rights. So despite her pain of losing her father and the Khalifa that was given divinely through the Prophet and the angel, and we know the story of Eid al-Ghadir, where over 300,000 people were witness to the last ayahs of the Quran being descended, and the Imam being declared the Imam after the Prophet, not the friend, but the Wali of the Ummah, and the allegiance that was given by the same people who then turned against them. Sayyidah Fatima did not stay silent. Despite the pain of losing her father, she went and stood up for her rights to ask for fadag, but also the imam of her time. She talked about who she was. She talked about who her father was as the prophet, right? Like if you read about it in fadag in history, the al-khutbah al-fadagiyya, it talks about all of that. It talks about the lineage and who her father was and who she is descended of and so on and so forth. Yet these people, it fell on deaf ears. Did they care? Of course they didn't. They had no intention of giving land back. And they usurped the title of Khalifa from Imam Ali. This is plain history. This is not an opinion. This is history that we read about and know. What did Sayyidah Fatima do? She spoke against that. Despite the pain in her heart of losing her father, she spoke up against that. So look here, again, from what Sayyidah Zainab embodied. Despite her own pain of loss, she stood up. Right? So look at that. Now, we know what happened after. That she was attacked viciously, mortally. Because of her stance and because of them wanting to capture Imam Ali, they came and attacked her house. They did not care that this was the house of Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, who just passed away not a few days before. They came and attacked the household, and she, and we know the story, was standing behind the door. And fire was started, and she was crushed behind that door. You know, when we were in Karbala, the first night that I arrived there, on the Fatimiyas, what they do is they have this huge, beautiful, heart-wrenching exhibition. And you can see it in one of the lives that we had. The story of Sayyidah Fatima. The story of how she lost her father. And you see her at the grave of her father. And then you see her in her home with the burning door. And beautiful artistic depictions. And I urge anybody who is there right now to take advantage and see that, or look it up and look up the pictures that we took in the videos. It gets to you when you see it Bain al-Haramain like that, and you think Fatima al-Zahra. This is what happened to her. And of course, you know the story of what this tragic crushing behind the door and the nail aborted her child that she was carrying, Muhsin, who could have been from Ansar al-Imam during Karbala, right? So we see here, afterwards, and there are 3 riwayats, and if you look at it, some say it was 40 days after the demise of the Prophet that she passed away from the broken rib and from her bleeding. Some riwayats say it was 75 days. And this latest riwayah where we're honoring Sayyidah Fatima is 90 days. And so what do? We honor all 3 of them throughout these few months of the love that we have for this great lady, you know? And so think about this. We get a simple cut, you know, paper cut, we burn our finger a little bit, and we're in agony and pain. Or we bite our lip and we get a cut in our mouth, right? We know the pain of that. Imagine your rib broken. A broken rib, how can you breathe? Your child is aborted, miscarried. You have a cut in you. You've just lost your father and the Prophet and your husband, the Imam of your time. His rights are taken away, and your rights of your inheritance are taken away. What kind of trauma must she have gone through? Which is a source of inspiration for us. Because what kind of calamities? And Sayyidah Fatima salamallah alayha knew what was going to happen to her children. She knew from the day that Imam Hussein was born, right? Before that. All of this. What kind of stress is that? But this is why these people are infallible. They teach us, they show us that despite these challenges and hardships in life, we persevere through patience. Tasbihat al-Zahra. And I get emotional each time I see this turba. I went into the haram of Al-Abbas after a very emotional encounter and a heartbreak, and I went into Al-Haram of Al-Abbas, and I was there holding on for 40 minutes, maybe crying, just speaking with my heart. And after I did the 2 ruk'ah ziyarah, I sat down across from him, and there was a lady with a child who was ill next to me when I was at the haram, and nobody disturbed me. They said, leave her, Khatayib, Bichara, leave her, she's in pain. And then when I sat down, this woman sat next to me with her baby, and I could see the child was sick, and a woman comes over. I'm fast forwarding the story quickly, but this woman came over, and she sat down and told her, why are you crying? If you're telling us that this child Al-Abbas gave you after 13 years, Why are those tears out? Those are valuable tears. Don't cry for your child. Al-Abbas will protect him. Get the heart surgery done for your child, because she recognized with the blue lips the child was like her child who was ill, who's now a young man. She said, your child will grow with Al-Abbas and the healing and treatment of Ahl al-Bayt. Don't cry. Get the surgery done, and they are your treatment. And I was in shock watching this encounter in front of me. And moments later, this woman comes over and gives me tasbihat al-Zahra in front of Al-Abbas, this beautiful, simple subha. And I was in shock. She gave me this tasbih because I asked Al-Abbas for a sign, something. Give me something. I don't know what I'm asking. I don't ask for me. I always ask for other people, but this time I need it. Ya Abbas. And he gives me this. Tasbihat al-Zahra, that the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family gave to Fatima al-Zahra in her times of hardship when he was alive. Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, is a source of healing and inspiration. And in those moments of my own personal difficulty, the sign from Al-Abbas was given to me. Sabr, sabrun jameel. Patience is beauty. And Fatima al-Zahra exemplified that in her life, but also in the days as she was slowly dying and leaving and withering and leaving this earth, what sabr means, what patience is, and how she prepared her family for her parting of this earth. She was rejoiced before her, when her father was dying, that she would be the first to join him after him. This was part of her patience that we can learn from and grow from, and how she exemplified الjar قبل الدار, right? The neighbor before yourselves, and giving and giving. And she would give her wedding dress. She would give her food, and the ayahs of the Quran al-Ma'idah came down in her honor of how she, 3 days of fasting, she kept giving and giving, and how this feast from Allah came down to nourish them. How can we not learn from, despite the tragic short life that she lived, the lessons upon lessons and lessons, and as a psychotherapist, and this idea of patience and endurance of strength. And Ali Raza told me, because he was witness to this after, he was witness, I discussed this with him after, and wherever we were walking around, little children would come try and sell their subhas, or whenever I bought anything, that I was always gifted a subha, or Laylatul Jam'ah, people were giving subhas as gift. And he said, sister, this idea of patience that is coming to you in a sign, and this message from Ahl al-Bayt is something you need to really reflect and share with others of what patience means. And I can only attribute this to Tasbihat al-Zahra, that again and again we heard, like in that Latmiya, but again and again how we heard and saw how Tasbihat al-Zahra can help us during times of difficulties, that we can learn from her tragedy, from I can't even begin to describe what kind of psychological trauma she experienced, but we hear it in the stories of the Na'i and the Latum that is attributed during this time for her, which is why we spend the time and the effort grieving this great woman, of her impact and influence on us in our lives. She is not only the daughter of the Prophet, she is not only the wife of the Imam or mothers of the Imam, she is also the lineage, the source of lineage for the Imams and the Imam of our time today. And she, by herself as a woman, is that source of inspiration for us through the tragedy that she lived through, and how this inspires us through strength and patience and endurance. How to be patient. Because she was patient, whether it's 40 days, 75, 90, she exemplified patience in her pain, her broken heart, her physical broken rib, the loss of her Janine, her child, and the loss of everything else around her. But she embodied that strength for us.
Thank you, Sister Barak, for sharing such heart-wrenching words, and you really visualized everything so beautifully. To imagine her pain is, of course, very impossible, what Lady Fatima went through, and the events that led to usurping her right, of Fadak is indeed very painful, and we can only pray that, Imam al-Zamana appears and, takes revenge for that. And, what is really sad is that till today, nobody even accepts the fact that, her right was stolen. And people question that, was it really her part? Did her father really gift it to her? And nobody even openly mentioned the names of her killers, which is very, very excruciatingly painful. You know, we say the names of the murders of even Janabi Ali Asghar. We say the names of the murders of Ali Akbar and all of them. But when it comes to Lady Fatima to date, nobody can openly say the names of her murderers, and that's very painful. It's heartbreaking. So I thank you
And I think,
for yes,
and
please.
just a
One minute.
quick point to that,
Yeah.
you know, we do say it in closed circles, and it's for the sake of unity with the rest of the ummah that we are very delicate with this topic, and it, you know, I've got mixed emotions with that, and it's we don't say nobody, we do say them in closed circles because of that. At the same time, we also exert the restraint that Imam Ali exhibited at the time. You don't think he could have taken them down one by one with one glance, with one flicker of his finger? You don't think he could have done that? He was following the restraint that was given to him by the Prophet. And this is the example that we are given to follow as well. It's not that we don't talk about it. We are following the Imam of Fatima's time, salamullah alayha, where he exhibited restraint in the face of this abuse that she experienced, because she experienced abuse, violence against women. Let's not, you know, steer away from that. She experienced violence from the same people who were the companions of the Prophet, who themselves said that they would follow Imam Ali. So I think we said it enough. But this violence aspect here is something that we see in society today, from the same men who say that we beat our chest for Fatima to Zahra. These same men, with the hands that they beat for her, they beat their children and women. So, you know, let's not just say, oh, the hypocrites back then. Let's look at our society today, the hypocrites within our own communities who say and tear up that, you know, Ya Zahra, but then look at what they do to their own families. You are not the follower of Imam Ali. You are not exerting restraint like the Imam showed. Don't, you know, go off and say, oh, you know, they did this to Fatima to Zahra, those are her killers, and that. You yourself are a hypocrite, and you're not even following the restraint of the Imam in your own home. So there's something that, you know, we need to align to that and bring attention to that. Just because you cry for Fatima to Zahra doesn't mean you yourself are not a hypocrite in your own home. This is a wake-up call and an awareness for those people who call themselves followers, just like those companions were. And look what they did to the daughter of the Prophet. Look at what you're doing. Look at this violence and abuse within our own communities against women and children. This is a wake-up call to say, no, enough is enough. We are speaking up for our rights as well. And for those who do speak up, we are not feminist. We're following the footsteps of Sayyidah Fatima, Sayyidah Khadija, and Sayyidah Zainab, who took their rights, who stood up for their rights. And we are doing the same, and no more, no more. So I just wanted to end off with that, because I think it's a really important point to understand and connect. And also just quickly, that although these women from the past 1400 years ago are a source of inspiration for us, we have plenty of women in our own centuries that are sources of inspiration, like Bint al-Huda, who is the sister of Shaheed al-Sadr, the time of Saddam, who stood up for her brother, who went and started a revolution during that time. But she herself was imprisoned and martyred like her brother. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. And this woman was a scholar, an educator, founded schools, wrote books, and was a prolific writer. This is a woman of the descendant of the household of the Prophet that lived in the last century, that is a source of inspiration for us today if you go and read about her, mashallah. So we have these amazing women in history who were from the descendants of the Prophet that can be huge influence on us today, nowadays. So don't say, oh, that was back then. No, we have women who were also inspired by them today to show us how to stand up against tyranny. So just wanted to send condolences to the Imam of our time for the demise of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Sayyidati wa Mawlati, Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, Salam Allah alayha. Thank you so much, sister. I look forward to our next programs. وعظم الله أجوركم وتقبل الله أعمالكم. السلام عليكم.
Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Sister Birak, for today's program. I hope that all of you really, really went to Karbala, you know, together with Sister Birak and Brother Ali Rida. And, you know, we felt the spiritual beauty of Karbala. And of course, Sister Barak shared so much about women empowerment and how we can connect it to our lives and about the psychological trauma that Lady Fatima Zahra went through. Thank you so much for today, for watching today's program, and inshallah, I'll be catching you next week for another episode on Youth Matters on Hidayat TV. This is your host, Sakina Habib. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
رویای رسیدن رویای آغوش رویای بوسه به جای جای شیش گوش رویای لبخند رویای عاشق رویایی که کم کم میشه آینه دل بی محلی که ببینه عاشق میگیره دلش بی محلی که ببینه عاشق میمیره دلش میمیرم از این گریه و زاری میمیرم اگه محل زاری میمیرم نگو دوستم نداری میمیرم از این گریه و زاری میمیرم اگه محل زاری میمیرم نگو دوستم نداری من بدون تو